Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to have you participate in this workshop. This is going to be a very hands-on workshop, so we're really excited about this one. So this entire series is part of a hashtag Visualize IT series. We've done 2 of these workshops already, and they were great. So we're really excited for the third one in the series to close off the year. We'll be hosting 3 more of them in January. And just some quick resources. I've posted a text in the announcement Q&A chat, which includes a couple of links. So one of them is number 1 is visualizeit.dev/resources. It's a quick reference for all your resources. Please bring a few sheets of paper, a couple of pens, and some color pencils or markers, whatever you feel comfortable with being creative with. Bring them along because it's going to be really hands-on, and Nitya is going to be sharing her sheets of paper and how she works through things as well. There's a tweet which has some links and examples with details from past things that Nitya's worked on, so you can use that as inspiration. Number 4, we have a resource hub. It's on dev.to, which includes all past event recordings, any upcoming January workshops that are coming up, and some context and background on what Visualize IT and creative storytelling is all about. We'd love to see what work you're doing on the Visualize IT hashtag. So if you are creating and working along with us, we'd love to see it. Please take pictures. Please post about them everywhere so we can see what's happening. And Nitya would love to kind of consolidate and look at everything, maybe provide feedback, and really just build a community around it. And then the last thing, I'd love to point you to the code of conduct for these events. Just because we're not in person, the code of conduct for virtual events still stands. So we'd love to see you follow along. I will be turning on captions for these events as well, so you can follow along with those as well. A quick introduction to Nitya. I know she's introducing herself as well, but she's awesome. She's a community and tech advocate with over 20 plus years of experience across industry, academia, startups, and consultancy. She has a PhD in computer engineering with software research and development expertise, and she works in cloud, ML, AI, social computing, mobile and web development, distributed systems, and a whole bunch of other things. And she's also a big community leader. She's very passionate about building inclusive communities and pragmatic software solutions that address real world needs. And obviously she's a great artist and sketchnoter as well. So yeah, I'll pass this over to Nitya, but if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. We'll be posting them and taking them up periodically throughout the workshop in a couple of breaks that we have through the workshop, and then at the end as well. So thanks for joining us, Nitya.
Thank you so much, Ayman. Can you all hear me okay? I mean, I just want to make sure that you can get audio properly. Are we good? Ayman?
Yes, you're great.
Awesome. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I just want to give a huge shout out to the Reactor. Ayman is part of the Microsoft Reactor, and they are like amazing folks. They run a lot of community events. They make life so easy when you want to do these things. So if you're looking out to like come present something in this series, in this kind of stuff, come talk to me, come talk to Ayman. We'd love to keep it going. But huge shout out to Ayman for giving me such a great intro. I just want to talk a little bit about me from the perspective of why I do this and why this is important to me. So kind of at a very high level, it turned out that when I look back in my journey in tech, every role I had seemed to always have some sense of communication and storytelling, though I didn't realize it at the time. So I'm a PhD in computer engineering. I'm also the parent of a very curious 12-year-old. If you follow me on Twitter, you know it. And it turned out that the thing that connected both of those is that whenever I want to teach people something that's complicated, like in my PhD, I had to talk about something that didn't exist. When it's my kid, I have to explain to him something that he doesn't necessarily have all the context for. Teaching that is always easier when you can tell a story, right? Because people naturally understand narratives. They understand how things flow. They understand where things should happen, etc. Moving on, when I joined my PhD, and after that, I went and joined Motorola Research for a while. I did a lot of work solving problems, like building next generation applications, right? And it turned out that all the stuff that we were doing with kind of like visualizing things, doing storyboarding, doing kind of like, note taking, etc. All of those really helped in making connections. Like you started seeing patterns because you're so used to like mapping things out. Fast forward, and today I'm a developer advocate on the Microsoft Developer Relations team. I focus on mobile and cloud and AI. And it turned out that all of that stuff actually comes in very handy because as a developer advocate, what you're really trying to do is build knowledge, right? Make sure that you can use content to make it very easy for people to understand and then apply the things they've learned. So my visual storytelling journey, however, started off very strangely. I started in this because I was burning out. So I think it was around 2017, and these are images from those times. I had burnt out and I took off time to go to India, and I was like, okay, I just need to kind of find my way back. I needed to find something that excited me again. And I started drawing, right? I started sketching everything I could do. So it started as self-care, because what would happen is when you sketch, your mind slows down, you focus, you're kind of not allowing things to distract you. Super useful when you have a lot of anxiety, say in crowds or about work. You know, it's a very meditative place to be. But soon enough, that started morphing into kind of almost journaling. And it's connected to self-care because it was really about being present. And this means that everywhere I go, I'd kind of take, you know, a little writing pad and pen and notepads, whatever, and just keep drawing. So on the bottom right, you can see that my kid was not happy. He was really upset about something that day. And instead of sitting there and talking to him, I decided to sketch him. And he was like, that is not funny. But it really meant something to me because it kind of captured that moment. I'll remember it forever. And that evolved into storytelling, because when you start looking at tech, it says that, you know, it's not only about telling you what happened, but making it visual in a way that helps you kind of like take away the complexity and assist recall. People always remember imagery, they remember colors, they remember icons and signage way better than they remember text. So today, I kind of want to talk a little bit about what the workshop's big agenda is. I'll also be completely honest, I'm terrified of doing this because I've never actually done a workshop this long before. So I'm not sure if I'll do too much, too little, but this is the goal. The goal is to start you off first by kind of arming you with a few simple tips and tricks for what you can do to start your visual storytelling journey. We'll spend a bunch of time on that, learning the different components of a toolkit, trying out simple ideas. And I will hugely advocate that if you haven't done so already, register for the series, because in January, Denise, you will do a workshop. Denise's workshop was what inspired me to start doing this a lot. And she'll go into depth on a lot of things, but this will be kind of like a primer. When we've gone through that, I actually want you to start thinking actively about how you can use that information. And so we're going to look at it in 3 segments. The first one is sketch the docs. I call it sketch the docs because it's really about how do we use this to kind of start making technical writing or documentation easier for people to understand. It could be you taking a technical document site and converting it into a sketch note for your own study guides. It could be converting it into a visual that you can put on social media to actually get people engaged. It could be you just creating like a visual vocabulary that you can use in all the talks that you do if you do a lot of talks on the subject. So you're going to start and sketch the docs by looking at a bunch of examples, and then see if you can pick one of those docs and try to do this yourself. After that, we're looking at chalk the talk. And to me, that was a very natural progression. Once I started like using sketchnoting in my daily life, it turned out it's a great way for you to plan things because it allows you to gather a bunch of information, visualize it, and then start kind of, it's almost like you zoom out, see the big picture, then you zoom in, chop it up, and start creating slides. So I want to tell you a little bit about my process, share a couple of examples, and hopefully inspire you to do something there. Last but not least, if time permits, we look at other things, right? Anything else you can do that could be interesting. I really want to focus on just 2 things. One is zines, which are a really great way for you once you started doing this to create things you can give away. And when you give them away to people, you not only reinforce your message, but it's kind of fun. It's always nice to get gifts from people. So can you print it and do something like a comic you can give away? And the second part, the 4 slide decks that you see here relate to 4 talks I've given on these at various times. The second part is really, can you take this idea and apply it to a different domain? Like I'm looking at education, maybe you're looking at web. How do you apply these ideas? If we get time, we'll look into all of those. So what is the storytelling roadmap? At a very high level, this is how I think about it. You start always with sketchnoting, and that's where we'll start today. And sketchnoting is really about visual note-taking, and it teaches you how to do things like capture ideas really quickly, right? Quickly and visually. Once you've done that, the next progression for me from a storytelling perspective is to start connecting people to what you said by using emotion. And this is like Denise used sites link there, and she's the first person who used to talk about this anthropomorphism, putting characters, right, giving faces and emotions to the things you visualize, and people connect. If you put a router and you say the router is being hacked, It's one thing to write it. It's another thing to draw a router that is looking terrified as things are attacking it, right? People resonate and they connect to the characters, and that becomes part of your storytelling. Last is Maggie Appleton's site. It used to be illustrated.dev, but I think it redirects to her blog. Is an amazing resource to think about visual metaphors, because the journey is, first you want to capture and just visualize information. Then you want to have people connect to the storyline by giving characters an emotion. But at that point, have they actually understood what you're trying to say? They've connected to it, but are they still kind of confused? What metaphors do is they kind of allow you to take ideas that are familiar to them, frame this new idea through that lens so that they can then transfer the learning. And if possible, we'll talk about an example later, but that's my roadmap. We'll only look at the first part today, but I definitely kind of, encourage you to go check out the others. So today, we're about to get started. If you haven't done this already, do grab a few sheets of paper. What you need is just kind of like a stack of paper. If you're a digital person and you have like an iPad and some piece of software that lets you like Procreate, lets you digitally sketch note stuff, it's perfectly fine. Pen and paper works for me every time. So we're going to have a few sheets of paper, at least 1 or 2 ink pens. I like black, you might like blue, whatever. And get a few color markers or pencils. That'll help you kind of explore some ideas around separation, context, connections, etc. That's all you need. And let me actually see, can you see my screen right now if I kind of flip it to this? So I'm actually going to be using, I just bought a document camera. So hopefully you can see this. So here is my materials. I've got a bunch of paper. I have a bunch of pencils here. And my favorite thing in the world is ink. So this is my blessed Parker pen. Okay, so if you can see this as we go along, I'm going to try to draw on this so you can see it as well. I also have an iPad with Procreate, and I might be able to show you some of the things that I've already done that we can explore later. So let's get back to the slides, if I can manage this. Okay, so if you've got those materials, next, what are we going to do? So in each kind of, as we go through this, what I'm going to try to do is talk a little bit about an idea, and then give you a couple of minutes to try something out yourself. Hopefully you will. Please hashtag visualize it and share it. I love this stuff. And then, take a break, right? We'll do a bunch of things together and then take a break. And during the break, you can ask me questions. It would really help if I got a lot of feedback around this, or use the time to try sketching other stuff. So feedback is appreciated. 3 ways you can get to me. I'm at Nithya on Twitter. My DMs are always open. I love hearing from people. I'm slow to respond sometimes. It's the holidays, but I will always respond. You can also go to dev.to/Nithya. This current talk has a post up there, which is on top of my list. The comments are open, so you can always just leave me a comment there and I will be able to connect back to you. And third, just hashtag visualize it anytime. I track the tag on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. So let's kind of get started. What exactly is visual storytelling? So I kept saying, this is a visual storytelling toolkit, there's a roadmap, etc. So I want to share with you a very simple example of something I drew. So this is when I was, and give me a second. This is when I was actually trying to learn about Azure. And what this is showing you is a really, really simple version of a sketch note. So what you're doing is you're communicating a complex idea with simple words and imagery that help clarify the user understanding, right? So if you look on the left side, that's the words. The definition of cloud computing is it offers the use of computing resources as a service over a network where distributed resources are provided to the end user as a utility. And by itself, that's a great definition, but you're not going to remember it. And how can I help you not just remember it, but potentially connect other things you learn to this particular concept? Excuse me. If you look at this on the right side is a visualization. I hope you can make sense of it, but the last picture there is my favorite. It shows a parking meter with a cloud park next to it. So what it's really trying to say is the cloud is a resource that you can pay for just like you pay for parking. And the amount you put in, you pay as you go and you pay per use. Those are the 2 fundamental kind of ideas behind cloud computing. And now I can zoom out after this and start building on this by showing a parking lot where the parking lot has blocks for cars, blocks for containers, blocks for AI services, etc., and start building on this metaphor. So this is a very simple example of what visual storytelling is. The second aspect of it is once you've been able to capture a simple idea statically, can you convert it into a narrative that engages the user and helps them make connections that will help them remember this later? This is a visualization of a docs page. This is about, for a recent project, we had an event called Learn Together, which walk people through developing apps for the Teams platform. Teams has a lot of stuff going on. And if I were to give you, and there's a link later on that I'll share with you, if I were to show you the actual page, you'll see it's full of text and a black and white diagram. When I started reading the docs, I wanted to really make sense of, okay, what are the pieces and how do they connect together? Visualizing was as simple as, first of all, kind of moving them around in space so I can see everything at a glance, color coding things that belong together, putting little icons, for example, the bot, so I can say, okay, this is about bots, and here, this thing is about webhooks, etc. And then using that to create connections. So if you look at it, there'll be things like send message that happens everywhere, but now you're able to understand the context in which it happens. So this allows you to build narratives. So if you boil it down, you can start by thinking of sketchnoting as the first step to visual storytelling. And what sketchnoting is, this is actually a picture of me sketchnoting live. This was in Toronto, and Iman was actually there at the time. I was sketchnoting a talk as it happened, and you can see I had my phone next to me. I was taking pictures as I went, just in case they put something on that I couldn't capture in real time. Took a picture, I would have that with me for context, but then rapidly try to capture what I could. So rapid note-taking, real-time information capture, visual elements, and narrative. And the biggest thing I need you to take away from this is you don't need to be an artist. All you need to do is have a perspective on what you're listening to. You need to have a viewpoint, and you do need to practice, practice, practice. But as long as you can capture your viewpoint in words and visuals, you're good to go. I'm going to put this for a second. I will share the slides later, but if you want to take one snapshot of resources, I also put a link to a resource that Ayman might have shared later, but these are the 6 resources that inspired me and that have been really, really helpful to me in building my storytelling journey. If you want to understand why it matters to be creative, read Austin Kleon's work. If you want to start sketchnoting, everybody reads Mike Rohde's books, so start there. On the right side are vertical skills, right? You want to do better in mapping. There's a really good book on hand-drawn maps. You want to learn how to take business processes and visualize them, look at visual doing. If you want to improve your lettering, that's a really, really nice book. I have them here. If possible, I'll show them to you later. And then the 3 things at the bottom, there are 3 different blogs from 3 popular sketchnoter / creative technologists. The first one will teach you a lot about sketchnoting basics. Denise's teaches you a lot about art and anthropomorphism. Maggie's teaches you a lot about metaphors. So hope that helps. And now I want to get started with our first exercise. So the book that inspired me on this one is called The Doodle Revolution. And I'm actually going to put it here for a second and show it to you. So this is The Doodle Revolution. It was written by Sunny Brown, and Sunny Brown is famous for actually having done a TED Talk on this topic. So what I want you to do is, just kind of work your artist's fingers, right? Like just loosen up. And I want you to do something very, very simple, which is Doodle. So this is an example of something that I had put together before, but I'm going to do one now. And what I want you to do is just pick up one of your pens or pencils, right? And without picking your pen off the paper, just draw, right? Connect it, do whatever you like, right? Connect your images, make anything you like, end it somewhere together. And then when you're done here, find spaces and contained areas and do something to color them. So I like hatching, so I'm going to do that. But take a minute and do this along with me. And I'm going to keep quiet while I finish this. Hopefully you all get a minute to do this, and then we'll talk about it, yeah? If you've got colors with you, go for it. I actually find, for me personally, colors are very, very meditative. It's very mechanical, the motion, but you also feel like color brings a lot of, I don't know, just visual interest into the things you do. Also, if you do this on digital, turns out these kind of things are super useful to make into like social media cards or banners for your posts or whatever. But more than that, it just kind of lets you let your mind go and just have fun. Kind of reminds me of the times we used to do the, can you color a graph and make sure two adjacent nodes don't have the same color? All patterns are connected. Cool. I don't know if you can see this, but I'm going to turn the light off for a second. Now you can see color better. So this was actually very simple. And hopefully you all had time to kind of try something out. But when Sunny talks about this, one of the things she asks is, how does this make you feel? So if you can, you're more than welcome to send a comment. But I also wanted to think just briefly about how you felt just kind of drawing things, right? This is not art. There is nothing complicated about doodling. But I'm sure that for at least a few minutes there, you were very kind of engrossed in how you could fill things in. Your focus might have improved, and it's always creative. So think a little bit about how that made you feel. And next time you go somewhere, take your artwork with you, take a writing pad and doodle, right? Get into this habit. And it actually, in my case, I don't know if it's true for you. In my case, it actually helps me pay attention to what's going on. Because when I'm doodling, all of this is very mechanical. My ears and my eyes are actually focused on what's going on, and I can absorb things better. So this was like a really simple exercise. And every morning I've gotten into the habit of doing this like for 5 minutes. It's almost like, the way you do your physical exercise in the morning to wake yourself up and make yourself fit. This wakes up your brain, kind of starts you off on a happy note. Next, we're going to try the second exercise. And this is because when we think about sketchnoting, visual storytelling, any of the stuff, it's really about two things, right? It's about being able to put stuff down on paper, and it's about capturing like ideas or words. So I want you to try this. This is your exercise number 2. And this is an example. I'm going to do mine here. But what I want you to do is on that sheet of paper, write your name in the middle, right? The way I have it here. And I'll actually just run it again. Write your name in the middle. And then on the top left side, write a couple of words on who you are. Like, what are the things that define you as a person? You know about me. I told you I'm a parent, I'm a PhD, I'm a pro developer, I'm a polymath because after 2 decades in tech, I learned a lot of languages. But when I look at what I care about, it's like, okay, there's a work side to me and there's a life side to me. And the work side, there are like specific topics I care about. But in the life, right, there's like my culture. There are things that visual storytelling is something that I consider part of life. It's like a journaling thing for me. Self-care. We live in this world where there's so much kind of like, hatred. So it's like nowadays I'm trying to educate myself on that. So those are the things I care about. And then on the bottom middle, or sort of like there, give yourself a guiding principle that kind of like very simply defines how you strategize or work, right? And if you have space, go ahead and experiment, add other things. I added a mission statement. This is literally the mission statement that used to be on my Twitter profile. And the thing that I want you to work through here is 2 things. Look at how your writing changes with the pace of your writing. And then second thing, think about the purpose, not about perfection. You can always erase these. You can do these again. You can do this 50 times, but take a minute to think. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes, and then we'll look back at what all of us did. So meanwhile, I'm going to do the same thing here. And you can see in this, I'm doing it a different way, but that's okay. And if you feel up to it, you can also visualize things, right? So put boxes, put arrows. So in this case, for example, if I want to say, I like working in mobile, if you feel confident enough, draw mobile, right? It's much easier than you think it is. I like mobile. What else do I like? I like drawing. Oh, no, we're talking tech, so let's do web. So when I think about web, it's usually the sign for the elements. When I think about AI, I can draw a really ugly brain, but we'll go with the robot because it's a great way for us to, and you can see it's not a perfect robot. What else? A mission statement. This really is something I try to live by. And now if you kind of have something really simple, you can play with ideas around it, right? So for instance, if you want to, you could put your social identity. If you wanted to, you could color code something. So for instance, separate this out. This is what you want to stand out. So I can do that, right? So just do something really, really simple. And I'll give it another 30 seconds and then we can kind of move on. But if you just did this, right, and you kind of built it up, you've built yourself a visual kind of profile. This is something you could put on a GitHub page. This is something you could pin to your Twitter profile. This is some way for people to, at a glance, immediately get a sense of who you are, what you care about, how you approach life, and maybe one or two things about your hobbies or interests that they didn't know. Cool? I'm going to wait till this ticks over. Then we'll go to the next one. Awesome. So with that, let's move to the next slide. All right. So hopefully you got a little bit of fun out of these two, right? Just got you started writing, drawing something. Next, let's talk about, take a quick break. If there are any questions, post them in here, but I'm just going to let you all finish up what you're doing. But after this, we're going to jump into building a visual toolkit. So if there are any questions, I'll take them right now. If not, just kind of finish up what you're doing, try to play with ideas, and then we'll get started on the next segment. How long usually does it take you to do those sketch kind of things? That's a great question. So I will tell you that when I started, and I'll actually show you a whole stack of sketch notes if you're interested. Actually, why not? Here, I'm going to put this on, oops. I'll put this on the camera so you can see them. So initially when I started, it takes me, like when I live sketch note, it takes me exactly the length of the talk that I'm sketch noting. And we'll look at an example later, right? So if someone's doing a talk for 30 minutes, that's how long it takes me to do that rough sketch. So let me see if I can, let me see if I can show these to you. Something like this, right? This is like taking a doc that's a page of text on one of the Microsoft Docs pages and reducing it down to a one sheet of like a cheat sheet of notes. This takes me about 20 minutes, right? And it's primarily not to do the writing because it's literally just notes. It's to understand, distill down, what is it that I want to capture? There are so many pages of notes. What do I want to capture from this? And then as I got better, I've been doing this for like 3-4 years now. The biggest thing is leaving spaces so that you can fill it in with the things you forgot, or you can reduce it to a visual or things like that. So to do something like this is literally the kind of the length of a talk or 30 minutes for whatever, how long it takes you to read and absorb what you see. However, if you want to do some of those like, really rich sketch notes, the color coded ones, the thing about this is it's really iterative. So you do this raw one, and I'll show you one later. You do a raw one, and then you go back and you refine it. That could take anywhere from like, an hour to half a day, depending on how much detail you want to put into it. Hope that helped. Awesome. If you have no other questions,
Hey, Nitya, we have 2 quick questions.
Okay.
One of them is from Wendy, who says, what do you
Hi,
do
Wendy.
when
I know which Wendy this is.
Oh,
I bet.
so the question is, what do you do when you make a mistake or want to remove something?
Okay, so there are actually 2 schools of thought here, right? If you're doing it on paper, so there's 2 things. One is you can avoid it, meaning that you always try your best. Like if you're doing something in digital, you can erase it, you can do something like that, or you can make sure that the things that you don't know, you've got yourself a cheat sheet on, so you're not making mistakes, but that's very rare. Instead, there are 2 approaches. One is you fix it by doing something over it. So if you've written something in ink, let's say, and it doesn't look good, draw over it, color it over, hide it, mask it beneath something else. People get really good at it after a while. The other option is just own it. So this is something that I've seen a bunch of people do, for instance, where let's say they spelled someone's name wrong and they've kind of done this whole sketch note and there really is nothing they can do about it. They can go in and erase it and put an ugly blot, but it wouldn't look good. Or they can literally put a little arrow, put a little crying face next to it and say, I messed up. It should have been this. And it becomes part of the narrative, right? So when you're doing these things which are like visual and sketchnoting style stuff, that's what you do. When you're doing things professionally, like you're trying to make a sketch note for someone else, it invariably means there'll be like a raw version and then you'll refactor it. So you'll have an opportunity to do a clean version later. Maran says, would you say it's mind mapping? Mind mapping, I think, is one of the things, like I would almost say that these are tools, right? Visual sketchnoting is a tool. It's like learn to draw, learn to organize things, learn to make them look nice. Mind mapping is one layer about like, what could you do once you have these tools? In fact, I think there are different words for it. But mind mapping is you've got these tools that are already existing today that let you just put kind of various thoughts and connect them. But it's very hard for you to bring your own perspective or your own visualization. So they might be related. You could use your visual storytelling toolkit to do mind mapping. Or if you're really good at mind mapping, you could use those kind of like concepts to make it faster and easier for you to like, sift through information, but they're not exactly the same. Does that help? Okay, I'm going to go on to the next slide. If there's anything else, let me know, Ayman. So now we're going to jump into kind of like the nitty-gritty of trying to do different things. Let me turn this light on. Okay, so if you look at your basic visual storytelling toolkit, it really has a bunch of different elements that you can use to kind of get started. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. Definitely take Denise Yu's course when she kind of does this in January. She does a great job going into great detail on a lot of things. In this case, I'm like going to try to do a quick review of a bunch of things that I think are relevant. So first thing is that you're looking at here is it's a sketch note of mine. And I did this on the iPad only because I could kind of do the replay and let you see how I actually built it out. And I want you to pay attention to 2 things. One is look at the flow, like how did I build it up, right? And if you look at this, you'll see that in my case, I kind of knew what my content was going to be. I knew what I wanted to do. So I had made these spaces and created a pathway, and then I was just filling it in. And as I fill it in, you can tell that in certain cases, I had underestimated or overestimated the space and I was just adjusting for it, right? But that's step 1. Step 2 is look at the different elements of a sketch note. And I'm going to go through them looking at the left side as a guide. So at the very least, all you need to know is how to draw lines, how to draw circles, squares, triangles, dots, curves, things like that, right? The basics of your alphabet. But once you have your basic elements together, what you're going to do is look at the different things you can do to bring visual interest. So fonts, in this case, look at the difference between where it says find your voice and where it says why should you sketch note. There's uppercase and lowercase. There's serif versus sans serif. There's bold. There's various things you can do with fonts that do one of 2 things. They can kind of give you visual interest. So it draws your attention to things that look interesting. It can provide hierarchy. You can get a sense of this is important, this is not so important. Next, layouts. As I mentioned, if you looked at the way my kind of sketch note was built out, the layout is really a great way for you to understand how you should put your information, not only so that you have enough place to put it all together, but so that the person who reads it later knows how the flow goes. We'll look into that later. Directionality. This is where you see things like arrows, icons. You see a whole bunch of things here. Like, for example, there are the little communities, like little tiny people. You see the little kind of speaker for a megaphone that says find your voice. people, there are various ways you can look at it. Draw simple stick figure like that just says here's a person, here's a bunch of people, or you can go into depth and start doing like emotions and faces. Colors. This one doesn't show this to you very well, but we'll look at it in other examples. Bringing colors allows you to create separation and connections. Quotes. Find your voice is a great example. I love, love, love quotes because at the end of the day, the sketch note should give people a glanceable review of whatever you want to capture, but give them a couple of takeaways, right? So quotes tend to be very emotionally like resonant, and they kind of are usually terse, so you can lift them out and make them stand out. And containers are kind of the things you use to cluster related things together. So to start, let me switch over to this. What you're going to do is just try to create in a corner of your page. Let's take a new page. And in the corner of the page, you're going to create a simple key, which says, here are the different elements that I need to know. So let me switch over to my sheet so you can see me do this. What you want to do is just kind of like, if you can do this, these are your basic elements, right? You need to be able to draw a dot. You need to be able to draw lines. You need to be able to draw curvy lines. You need to be able to draw circles, rectangles, squares, and then any kind of texture that you feel, right? There are various other things that you could do, right? Whatever you like, but if you do these basic things, it turns out that pretty much everything that you draw is going to be based on those, right? So let's start by keeping this in mind. And what you can do is right away, you can try to see how you can build things that combine them. So for example, if you want to show a ripple, you could basically do this and then, right, show something falling in. If you want to draw a home, this is a classic home that people do, right? And then you have, so it's very easy to kind of start from these and try when you look at different pictures to distill them down into very, very simple shapes that you can put together. Next, once you've got that fonts. So this is actually the place where I think a lot of people kind of struggle, because at the core, visual storytelling, sketchnoting is really about words and imagery, but words are handwritten, right? It's about being able to create like visual interest, but also make it legible so people understand what they're reading. So here, I want you to practice each one of these. So serif and sans serif, and I'm going to actually show you some examples here if you want to try them. So let me get this here. So let me switch over. All right. So these are from Mike Rohde's book, but it's easier for me to kind of just show it to you. So let's see if I can show you some serif fonts, and then you can work on that. And then I want to show you some examples from, all right, here we go. I hope you can read that. So if you want to try examples, try this. So serif usually means that you have like certain feet, right? You have to put little feet on them. So let's try writing a very simple serif A. You would literally do A, put little feet on them, right? Join it up. A very simple serif. Has a lot more curvature to it. Slab serif is just another version of it, where rather than have the feet be kind of very curvy, they're very flat, right? And then have one script version that you can pull. There are many different font types that you can try, but you could do something really simple. 3D blocks, those are the examples that are given in Mike's book. And in fact, the bigger version that I'm working on, I'll show you in a second, takes these to a completely different level. But if you can kind of like work your way to writing simple fonts and explore these different types, you've got yourself a very simple kind of like tool that you can use to create different kinds of lettering in different places. So as an example, you might want to use something really fancy for the title of your page. You might want to use blocks to kind of create the quotes and so on. If you go back to this, you can also kind of have in your toolkit a bunch of different types of writing, right? So everyone knows how to write cursive, hopefully. So practice cursive. Cursive is a very easy way for you to really write fast and capture a lot of information. On the other hand, I have found, and I don't know, your mileage may vary, that uppercase tends to be the most legible. So when you're writing anything, if you choose to, you could write the whole thing out in uppercase here. It's really much more clear for people to understand if you have bad writing. Same goes for lowercase. If you separate out every letter and write them out, that helps. Script is the fastest. This one, these two are a little bit slower, but they help you capture stuff much more clearly. While you're working on this, I also want you to think about your pacing, right? So think about fast, slow, and medium. So let me show you what that means. So what's that? The quick brown fox? Let's see if we do this, right? If I write something really fast, you can see that it's not legible, but if I understand my writing, I can really in real time capture a lot of information really quickly. If I write it really slow, it's excruciatingly slow, but I could probably make it really clear. Or even if I were to use cursive. You want to find a happy medium, right? So you want to find a happy medium where you're able to do enough that it's legible. So work with pacing, play with different paces at which you can write, help yourself speed up, figure out what kinds of fonts you are fast at, use those for live note taking, find out what you need to work on that could be pretty, and maybe even make cheat sheets for yourself like I do. That makes it easier for me to capture them. So the two things you want to figure out in this is fonts give you visual interest, but they also give you hierarchy. So I can immediately do something like, this is my title, and if I write something in half the size, it's likely to be a subtitle. And if I just write, these are likely to be paragraphs, right? So remember, fonts are about having types of fonts, sizing giving you hierarchy, and the types giving you visual interest. While I'm at it, I'm actually going to show you this other resource. So remember, one of the things I put up there was lettering, alphabets, and artwork. If you are interested in improving your lettering, this is the resource I'm using. Give me a second while I open it up, and then I'll show it to you. So this is, hopefully you can see this. This is the book that I mentioned. It's called Lettering of the Alphabet. And what I really like about this is he has 60 different fonts, but not only does he give you examples, he gives you the whole kind of way to work through them, right? So here is I hope you can see this. Can you see it? Is it too much? Is this better? No?
It's a little bright, Nitya.
It is, yeah. I'm trying to figure out how I can. Nope, that doesn't do it.
That's too dark.
All right, we'll see what we can do. I think you might be able to see if
we can see most of it.
Okay, yeah. I'll go very slow. So here is an example of what I mean. I really love this book, recommend it highly. I'm going to work my way through this. What he does is for 60 different types, he kind of walks you through, here's what the entire alphabet looks like. And then the 4-step process for it. Here's how you draw a single letter. First, you draw it out rough. So the process is, as he puts it here, first you wireframe it. So the composition, you start with a basic wireframe, know how you want to like write your letters out to create the effect you want. Then you create a rough kind of sketch around it. So if you want 3D, if you want to like use the font that you're doing, put in lines, whatever. Then you refine it. All of this stuff is being done. You can do it on paper and pen, or you can do it digitally. Refine it, add more detail, erase the things that don't matter, etc. And last step is add color. So I'm going to cut this off. Sorry. Okay, if you look at this, this is a really great book because just the way you're seeing this now, there are 60 to 70 different font types and examples of really great banners and stuff you can do. So I was really inspired by this because to me, visual metaphors are very much about just a very kind of iconic image and text around it, right? So you can literally have a career making banners and stickers if you like. So hugely I'd like recommend this book, and I'll talk about it another day when I've got it. Look up the website. I'm going to put resources on that there. So this should have covered fonts. If you had a chance, hopefully you played around with some of these ideas. Let's go next to layouts. So the thing with layouts is what you really want to understand is how are you putting out your information in a way that you can capture it all on one sheet of paper. It's really a constraints problem, right? So these are many of the different kinds of layouts that are recommended or tried out. If you go to visualizeit.dev, there's a resources. I think it's /resources at the end. If you go to that particular site, actually, let me see if I can show it to you. Okay, we'll do it here. What you'll see is your best resource for this is Pinterest. So if you go down, hopefully you can see the site. At the bottom, I have a whole bunch of links to visual assets that you can look at to kind of figure out, what are ways in which I can like take inspiration from people who've gone before me. So look at either, I think it's the visual note-taking one. Go look at them and see what kinds of ideas people have. So you can literally kind of just look at it and see how are people doing their different layouts and learn from it. Hugely, hugely recommend Pinterest. It's my favorite. But that said, kind of, at least is what I do. Have at least 3 that you're really good at and that you understand when you will use and why. In my case, I use these 3 the most. There is the grid one, which is really kind of like a very simple rows and columns. Hub spoke, which has a central thing, like a title or something, and then a whole bunch of spokes going out from it. And freeform, which is really could go all over the place, right? There is no fixed layout. And I use them for 3 different reasons. The grid is really, really useful when you have a lot of information and you just want to kind of like capture it in a very systematic, structured way. So if I'm looking at a technical document and I want to just copy down like the nuances of various things, I start by looking at how many pages are there, what are the sections, put grid squares for each section, then read the section, distill it down, enter it into the grid, right? So for research, it's a great way. Study guides, things like that. The hub spoke architecture works really well when you have a central idea that you want to get across, and there's a whole bunch of connected things around it, right? So for example, if you're writing a blog post about, here are 5 things you need to know if you want to talk about security. Here are the 5 terms, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you put the thing in the middle, and then each one of those is kind of a related side, but it gives people the immediate visual thing of like, okay, there is a central idea, and these are all connected to it. The third one, which is freeform, is really what I use all the time for live notes, because you don't know ahead of time whether it's going to be a structured thing, whether it's going to be a centralized thing. You don't know. So just kind of working your way to figuring out what the best is. I usually go with a spiral. It's kind of freeform with a spiral because what happens is you kind of fill your space out as you go. And suppose you get to the point where the person is still talking, but you have no more room. You stop and wait till they're done and put your like final takeaway in the middle. On the other hand, if they end up kind of finishing really early and you've got a lot of space, you can then fill up the space with one picture. So either way, Radial works very nicely if you don't know ahead of time how your content's going to be structured. So the exercise here is pick a page. So for example, you could take a docs page. Hopefully you're all like looking at something when you are, or you have something in mind, and try to figure out one exercise where you can use it for a grid, a hub spoke, or a radial. So here, for instance, if you have no other option, then I'm going to give you a page that you can look at and try to kind of create a grid around it. So let's say we'll do Learn. We'll go to Microsoft Learn. I like this because it's a much easier kind of site to figure out. So you have a whole bunch of things. Let's say we want to learn about, here is a very simple page. How would you kind of take one of these and showcase it? You want to show that this is about, let's say, what are the ideas in here? Let's try this. How would you actually sketchnote this page? So I'm going to try to do that here. When I look at this right off the bat, I look at it and go, I can see there are 6 components and there's a central theme. So I'm going to try to do it hub and spoke. But you can try something else. But just practice, get one thing. And in the meantime, if there are questions, Ayman, let me know. This lets me kind of take them as I do a demo version of it.
Yeah, sounds good, Nitya.
Also, feedback is super useful. If you prefer, like I just talk through things rather than give you time to like try them out on your own, let me know. This is kind of the first time I'm trying workshops. So I want to make sure that everyone has the ability to kind of follow through and at least get some tangible stuff out of it. So here's how I would kind of work my way through this particular site. Where did I put my pen? Here it is. Okay. So I look at this page and I'm like, okay, it's Azure fundamentals, right? So right up top, I'm like, okay, we're going to talk about Azure fundamentals. can see I already didn't gauge the size of the page. And then if I look at this, this says part 1, and there are, immediately I see there are 6 other parts to the series. So what's a great way to visualize that, right? One way to visualize this is to literally have a path going out. And then over here, I know that this is 1, and I'm told there's 6 others. So I'm going to use this here and add something in here which says, hey, there are others. I don't know anything about them. But for now, I'm going to say there are 6 other parts to the series, right? And then kind of make a note to myself of, oh, this is a 6-part series. Hopefully you can see that. Cool. So those are the learning paths. Now, if I go down this, it says in this learning path, I kind of looked this up and it looks like there are just 3 parts. So immediately I'm like, okay, there are 3 parts. So this lets me do, there's a part 1. I'm going to call it 1A. 1B, 1C, right? And now if I look into this, it's like, okay, this one is an introduction to Azure. What is cloud computing? What is Azure? Tour of services, started with accounts, case study, knowledge check, and summary. So I'm basically just going to say this is an introduction, intro to Azure. Go down. This one is discover concepts. And then this one, and this is part of the thing, right? You want to look at it and be like, what is the keyword? 1 or 2 words. You don't want more than that you want to extract and put out. This one says Azure, so we're going to talk about architecture, right? And if you run out of space, that's fine. I mean, there's no wrong answers, right? So immediately I've got this thing of like, okay, I have this. Now, can I make it better? Sure. I can be like, hey, this is Azure Fundamentals. So I'm going to kind of color code this so that I know that all these are part of Azure Fundamentals. And then I might do something simple like say, okay, after this, we're going to do 2 and then 3. So this is just like, you know, what we used to do in school, color coding stuff, I guess. So something as simple as that. Then go through and start looking at it. So if you want to convert this into visual note, you can look at the first part and say, now look at Intro to Azure, and I can see it has 6 parts to it, and they're all kind of steps, right? In this particular case, they're now like not, they're literally like do this, then this, then this. So at this point, I might choose to do mine here as a grid, and I can see 3, 6, 7, 8. So, right? So I might be able to fill stuff in for each of those, and then put a recap here, right? This is just an example of how you could visualize it. Now, when you look at this, right, like someone who comes at this for the first time can immediately start seeing that there is a central theme. It has 4 components. The first component, I'm expanding it into, hey, it's a grid. There's a structured set of information that they're given out there. In the second one, there is different types and benefits. So maybe over here, because it's kind of talking about categories, types, I might be able to do the equivalent of a comparison A versus B, right? Put that there. So use layouts as a way to figure out how you can kind of assemble information as you see, figure out the best way to represent it. All right, so let's get back to this. If that helped, then you can kind of look to the link that I put there to see other kinds of layouts that you can use as well. Once you've got to this, your next thing is like layouts are really you dumping a whole bunch of information on a page. But you wrote it down and you structured it in this grid, in this hub, whatever. But it doesn't necessarily tell people how they should navigate it. So if I look at this Azure Fundamentals thing that I just showed you 2 seconds ago, if I hadn't put the numbers in there, you'd have just seen a central idea and 4 or 5 complementary ideas. But how do you navigate through them, right? So this is where you use things like markers, arrows, or explicitly drawing out paths. So if you go back to the example you're working on, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes so you can try to figure out how you will actually build navigation through your content. And while you're doing that, I'm going to show you some of the examples of notes that I've done and how I've kind of worked my way through that. So remember, you can use arrows to to kind of outline workflows. So if you're doing something like a tutorial, it's step 1, step 2, step 3. If you've got visual metaphors, you can use those also. So in this case, I'm using the metaphor of a trail marker. So immediately I can have like red triangles and orange circles and use those as connectors that kind of connect various things and say, here's a trail, that's your trail marker, and then build on top of that. And then there are simple things like, the whimsical path, snakes and ladders. I've done that before. You want to kind of think about it as, well, this is literally a walk through, a nature trail, whatever. You can use those metaphors and build on top of that. So let me switch to this and show you some of the examples of what I do. We're going to look at this example a bit later anyway, but hopefully you can see it. Here is a simple example where I kind of was like, okay, this is when I was planning my talk, but you can immediately see that there is a navigational path, right, that goes through the whole thing. The arrows give you a very clear sense of direction. The highlighted letters tell you what the different segments are. And when I'm in a particular place, I use additional things like numbers to make sure that even when a user gets to that point, they're able to understand how those things are organized. So hopefully that gives you one idea of what you could do. The other thing is I love my finish things. I always like using finishes in kind of like showing this is where you're anchoring and this is where you enter, right? So the effectively, like for navigation, having a start and a finish and then a path through it is a great way. Let me see if there's any others that I can share. And meanwhile, I'm hoping that you're actually playing around and trying to build yours. I'm just showing you examples of things you could do. Here is one that does not have the benefit of any color, but you can immediately tell I kind of have the same pattern, right? There are arrows that go from place to place. Within a particular component, it usually goes top down. I use things like dotted lines to separate different things that are kind of connected, but actually different parts of the same kind of cluster. And let's see what else. Numbering. So very, very simple ways for you to get navigation done. I think if I have a minute, I'll do one more and then we should go on to the next. Let me see if I have a good one. This is a bad one, but we can look at it. Here's another, right? In this case, it's color. You immediately can see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but the color immediately kind of draws your eye to where those are because the arrows by themselves are not always visible. Okay, so let's get back to this. And I think I've totally not done justice on time. Next is icons. Icons are actually the most valuable thing that you can do because when you're looking at whatever area you work in, so let's say you're doing visual storytelling, right? Are you doing it for travel journals? Are you doing it for teaching people tech? Are you doing it for talks? Are you doing it for the web, right? You probably have a context in the back of your mind. So the three things that you want to think about when you think about iconography is, first, you don't have to have artwork, but is it recognizable, right? So if I want to say, if I draw a light bulb, that's a light bulb, but it's recognizable signage because over a period of time, we've all come to represent this notion of a light bulb as idea, right? You can also add a little kind of word underneath it to represent it if you want, but that's the idea. It's like the icon should be recognizable enough. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if you can draw enough so people can say, oh, that's a person, this is a tree. That's all you need. Second, it has to be relevant to the context they're using it in, right? So the same thing, if I use a spider and I'm doing this in education, spider can be about like nature. If I put it in the context of web, right? Like when I'm talking about web development, the minute I put a spider, I'm actually using that as a metaphor for spidering the web or search queries or linking different documents together. So make sure that when you use an icon, it's relevant to the domain that you're using and it doesn't get kind of like misunderstood. And finally, this is the biggest value. If you spend any time at all, spend time learning how to draw and keep a cheat sheet of icons, because icons are like signage. The minute people start recognizing them and associating them with keywords in your particular domain, you can get rid of huge amounts of lettering and replace it with an icon and people immediately understand what that means. So you're building a cheat sheet or a vocabulary. So in this exercise, what I really want to do is see if you can do two things. Whatever area you work in, pick 5 keywords. And you can take them from here if you like. Pick 5 keywords that are representative of your area and come up with simple 5 icons for it. And I'm going to show you ways you can make your life easier here. But I hope you have 5 keywords. I'm going to give you a minute to just think up 5 keywords, and then I'm going to switch over and show you where you can get started. If you want to, you can also try, just picking up one of these and using them here. So in my case, let me get back to my sketch note. All right, so I want to do, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? Let's say I want to talk about mobile, because that's where I'm at, right? So I want to talk about mobile development. What are the keywords I want? Let's say I want to be able to represent a device. I work in Android, so maybe I want to have a keyword that lets me tell the difference between something using Android and something that is iOS, perhaps. So I'm going to pick that one. What else? Let's say we want to have something that shows notifications. I want to have something that talks about performance. And usually when it comes to mobile, it's battery. And let's say I want to talk about user experience, because mobiles are very much about users, right? So I've gotten these 5, right? So I'm like, okay, now I want to draw them. How do I go about creating an icon? Like, I want to get a cheat sheet. So what I'll do is create, first of all, a cheat sheet, right? For myself. So I'm going to draw the icon here and then write the description here. But how do I come up with an icon? What I tend to do, and in fact, almost every sketchnoting person will tell you this, is get inspired by other people. I like the Noun Project. You could basically think of other ones, but Noun Project to me is amazing because it's real artists who build stuff. Now, do not go ripping them off. That's not what the idea is. The idea is you get inspired, see if you can draw something similar and kind of get a sense of what are different ways people visualize this word. And the reason this is important is you want to pick a visualization that people can look at and actually recognize as the thing you want them to recognize, right? So let's say here, I have device. So I'm going to say mobile device and see what happens, right? What are the ideas here? All right, let's see. Okay, here's a very simple one. It looks like just 2 ends and things. So let's try doing that, right? I'm actually going to move this over to the other side so that I can continue to look at it as I draw. But let's say here, I'm like, okay, I like that. So first one, mobile device. Remember the thing I was telling you about everything, just boil it down to the basic shapes. So according to this, there is a line there, the camera thing there, there's a home button, and that's a mobile. Now, you might not recognize this as a mobile, but other people kind of, especially like if you're looking at flip phones, maybe you think of that as the quintessential mobile. So great, if you want to do that, do flip phone, search for that, right? And you can go ahead and kind of find, brilliant ones. I'm actually personally fond of this because this is like my first phone at Motorola, right? So there's your mobile device. Next, let's look at Android. Android is easy because you have that little droid figure and it's really super easy to draw. So I kind of cheated a little bit, but you can try the same thing. I'm going to just keep talking as I go. In the meantime, I hope you are trying out your own. So for Android, it's actually very simple. It's a half circle with feet and then hands next to it. It has 2 and then Android. Notifications. This is a good one, right? When you think about notifications on the phone, on the web, whatever, what is your preferred symbol for notifications? Mine tends to be that bell. And sure enough, when I look at it, that's what it shows up. It could be notification, it could be alert. And it is effectively a bell. right? Battery, we all know how to draw a battery, hopefully. And user experience, this is a tough one, but you can start by just look for user experience, but otherwise you could just draw a user, right? So my users are not good looking. Okay, so this is not perfect, but I might decide this is my vocabulary. And from now on, wherever I go to talk about these particular concepts, I'm going to repeatedly use these icons. It also helps if you actually pick a color code, so that I might end up using something like a green alert means that this is like, just a low warning alert. A red one means this is an error, right? So I might use that kind of thing as well. So if you've kind of got there, hopefully you've got to the point where you've got some ideas of icons that you could build, tried out Noun project, got some kind of good icons that you could start with building your own cheat sheet around. Next, we're going to come to people. And then I think, whoa, time's flying by. All right. Then we're going to look at people. For people, you really want to actually just have 3 different things you want to think about. How do you draw a single person so you're representing a user anywhere in your text sheet? Second, how do you draw groups of users? Like, so single user versus community, so person versus people, and then poses. So poses are usually relevant to your domain. So if you're doing something like, I don't know, if you're doing a sports themed blog, then you want to have poses related to sports. If you're doing an IT blog, maybe you want to have different poses reflecting people designing on the board, someone taking a call on an IT help desk, right? Things like that. So one of the great resources I really liked is this Gesture Fest that I've linked up here that gives you a whole sense of examples. I will also point out that in the same kind of like the Visualize IT, oops, I've lost my mouse. Give me a second. Okay. In the same set of resources that I've put down here, there are a ton of places on Pinterest where you can find examples of people. So go to one of these, pick them up, learn how to kind of like pick a few poses and get really good at them, right? The basic drawing of a single person, Denise's workshop is the best. I cannot tell you enough, but I will say my favorite ones are, first is a single person. So there are 2 ways in which you could do it. This is the Teams way, which I've kind of started getting used to. So you can do that, which is simply like 2 people or a group of folks kind of thing. You can also do the simple person, which is like, I think they call this tooth people, right? Or you can do a very simple square. So the square person is what you have there, basically someone holding it up and kind of singing. So these are all, right? So if you want to kind of look at people, what you really want to do is practice drawing a single person. So the stick people example that I gave you is over there. Star people is the other example that I've seen a lot of sketchnoters use. And with star people, the idea is that you draw the head and then you start a star, right? And then you can kind of dress them up. So very easy to build like simple poses, simple figures. If you want to kind of get more detailed, definitely pick up 3 or 4 poses. So the exercise I put here, and I'm not sure if we'll have time for all of them, so I might skip this one, is pick 5 poses from one of those lists. You can pick it from the Gesture Fest list, or you can go to the resource list that I had, go to the Pinterest page and look for things that reflect your domain, the kinds of activities your users do, and then kind of just draw and practice them. Stick figures are the easiest. And if you can't recommend Denise's workshop enough, you can kind of go beyond that to draw faces and emotions and more. So next we're going to talk about colors. This one is not the kind of like the animated version. I think I might have that later. But what colors do for you is provide 2 kinds of value in your sketch note. One is colors separate spaces. So in this particular case, the top one is my live sketch note. It's what I was just grabbing information in real time as the speaker was speaking. Then later on, I took that original note and I started cleaning it up to kind of create more detail. It creates separation, etc. So colors for separation is where the background, that like light greenish color that you see all over there, that by making that the background, I effectively create separations of islands. You can see that every single concept that's relevant is highlighted in white. And there's this kind of gray background that immediately creates a separation. So now I see different areas. You can also use colors for connection by saying, here are two different things, but they belong to the same category or the same value. So right, using colors as a way to say all the yellows on this page, even if they're not close to each other, tend to have something related. So in this case, for example, there's this whole kind of yellow area which talks about insights. There is a whole bunch of requirements in blue that are connected together, etc. The big thing that you want to think about when you pick colors is accessibility. This is something I have not been doing and I hope to get better at. What does that mean? It means that like there are colorblind folks for whom your color scheme, if you're relying on color to be the thing that creates the separation or the connection, and you didn't pick colors that were accessible, that were inclusive to all populations, then you're effectively losing information in your sketch note. So I know PowerPoint, for example, has an accessibility checker that lets you check the color schemes, but you can also go to different sites and figure out what palettes they have that might be relevant. I actually have used a couple of them. I think there's just basic, you know, if you're a fan of Canva, there's basic color palettes that you can get that are known to go together. But once you pick the colors, definitely do an accessibility test to make sure that those can be used by everyone and that the information you're encoding with color is actually visible. Okay, and I think this is the last one. Yeah, and then we'll talk containers. So this is the last one. To me, quotes are the single most important thing that you can extract and showcase in your sketch note. So anytime you see one of my sketch notes, and let me show you an example again, like something that's an older one here, right? If the minute you look at it, you're likely to immediately kind of, your eye gets drawn to the big things that are there, right? So make room for growth is a quote, right? Having kind of the ability to pick out the right quotes to amplify and showcase is important. So you want to understand what the purpose of the quote is. So the purpose of the quote is usually one of two things. Either it highlights a key takeaway. If that's the case, the speaker or the document will tend to be using that quote multiple times. So look for repetitions. So if you see that a person uses a certain phrase, right? They're like, I don't know, kind of digital transformation, right? They use that phrase and they use it repeatedly in multiple places. That is a signal to you that your subconscious should pick up, say, there should be a quote around this that kind of brings value because this is apparently an important thing, a phrase or a saying, right? The other one you want to look at is emotional resonance. So in certain cases, it may not be repetitive. They may say it once, but the way they say it is so unique that you know that that's the takeaway message people are going to have, right? So when you kind of recognize the point where people clap for the user after they say something, or the speaker after they say something, capture that and think about extracting a quote out of that anchors your sketch note. Last, I didn't get to put this here, but I've put a link to this Getting Started with Sketchnote. There are tons of tutorials, tons of slides, tons of resources. This is a great 25-minute tutorial workshop for sketchnoting and shows some examples of containers. I put it at the end because whenever I sketchnote, I tend to leave containers either at the beginning or the end, meaning that if I know what I'm if I know this is what I'm going to be sketchnoting today and it has 10 things, then I might, like as you saw in the example keynote, put those containers out ahead of time, and then I need to fill them in. When you go with that approach, a container is effectively a way to kind of collect together and group ideas or create boundaries, right? It's one of those things. You have a lot of ideas and you want to contain them in one space, so you can use a container to do that. Or you want to create a boundary for something that you're saying. So there are some examples here. This is like a speech bubble, a banner, a starburst, etc. If you build your containers up front, it means that you have a clear idea of how you're structuring your sketch note, and then you need to fit your content into it live, right? So you might run out of space, you might need to squish it. So think carefully about that. However, if it's a planned sketch note, meaning that you've done a raw sketch note and then you want to convert it into a good looking one where you now know what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, then by all means start with the containers first, because that lets you kind of do the coloring, etc., and then write stuff on top. But invariably what I do is I write my sketch note, get everything together, and then use containers to create boundaries around things that are related. One of the things containers can do is add whimsical visual interest. So the example here is, the one that shows the little kind of style with the cross post, the signpost. That's a great way. It's a container of sorts because it's going to contain information on each of those things, but it also has a secondary kind of like a visual metaphor that you can use to direct people to various parts of your sketch note. Cool. And with that, I think we're done with the toolkit part. Quick recap. These are the elements that we did. For each one of those, there was an exercise on the side. I will put these I'll kind of make sure I'll dump the slides out on speaker deck and send the link to Ayman to post into the meetups. But these are the things you can experiment on, and the resources for those are on the site that I pointed you to before. With that, I'm going to take a short break if you have questions before we start on the next part, which is sketching the docs and chalking the talk. I think right now we've got about 45 minutes left. So effectively, we have 3 segments. Each of them is a use case. And I want to take questions down based on what you're interested in. I kind of will go through case studies for each one that shows you how you can use these skills to actually build up stuff there. But were there any questions right now, Ayman?
No real questions yet, but we have a couple comments. One of them is from Wendy, who says, accessibility rules, more than just colors, stay away from italics, things that screen readers can't reproduce, and look into assistive devices which will be used. And she says, they say they love accessibility and sketchnoting.
Yes. And Wendy, I know like you've been doing a bunch of stuff. So if you do write a blog post, if you do have resources, send them to me. You know where I am, because I'll add them into that list. I think this is actually absolutely one of the things, even in Microsoft, where like we're very, it's not only color and all the things you point out, but also the language, right? Like when we use specific words and highlight them, they could mean different things in different languages. We want to be kind of making sure we're not using culturally inappropriate memes, all those kind of things. So it is actually super, super useful to know a little bit about this. I even, one of my colleagues had mentioned this, for instance, like, I think, is it a red cap or a green cap? I forget. It actually has a symbol, or it has symbolism in certain countries. You might unwittingly use it just to represent a user, but that could actually give a different message. So yep, I hear you completely.
Great. And we also have one other comment from Marin, who says, I love to learn new things and I'm a seasonal programmer. Azure Fundamentals is great, but please show one programming language as well if you can.
Do you mean like visualizing the programming language documentation?
Yes.
Okay, so I haven't got one here, but you asked for it, so I'm not hopefully like kind of blowing my own horn here, but I am currently going through a learning exercise on Kotlin. So there is a site called kotlin.fyi that I set up that I'll be working on, and I will be using this to put visual sketch notes to learn Kotlin, right? Like, so how do we represent concepts? So there are 2 different things in here. One is when you think about a programming language, there are concepts like a term. So for example, Kotlin has this thing called coroutines. So I can use coroutine as a word and create a visual around it that explains coroutines to people. That's one kind of thing. The other kind of thing is, how do I do a workflow that tells you how to set up and build and run a Kotlin program, right? So if those are the kind of things you mean, definitely keep an eye on this, because I will be doing this here. However, you can also DM me at Nithya on Twitter if you have a specific programming language in mind, and then I will kind of show you examples. The closest things for me are right now, because these are the areas that I'm interested in, is Azure and Android. And in both of them, I think programming language-wise, you're really looking for concepts that you want to sketchnote. You can sketchnote code, obviously, right? But you can sketchnote workflows. You can sketchnote kind of like solution architectures, things like that. So keep an eye on this one and send me a note on Twitter, and I'll definitely try to pick some up for you. Cool. You've all been here quite I mean, what do you think? Should we take a 2-minute break because it's been more than an hour, and give people time to kind of go grab something or take a bathroom break, etc.? Or should we keep going?
Do you think the latter half, so is 40 minutes enough to cover the last few chunks of your talk?
I'm actually going to, let me kind of show you what's on tap. Give me a second.
Great.
We may not be able to cover everything, but we can walk through, we'll walk through some examples. So
Okay.
I think what I might do is skip the zine part and just kind of walk through like examples of sketching the docs that can give people like ideas for how I've sketched them. So for both of this, so Sketch the Docs is really about looking at a documentation page and using the tools that you learn to distill it down into a visual. And then Chalk the Talk is about how you could construct your talk from those visual notes. So for both of them, I kind of want to deconstruct one of the things I've done. So I think I could do that in 10 minutes each.
Okay.
And
perfect.
then we can kind of see our way to doing more. So should we take a break or?
Yeah, we can take a 1 or 2 minute break.
All right, let's take about, what time is it right now? It's about 9:20, oh, sorry, it's 2:21. So let's take about, yeah, a couple of minutes. And in the meantime, if you have questions, please post them here. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna grab a few resources that I can get together to start the next section on. All right, if there are any other questions on stuff till now, let me know. And before I start the next section, I want to just show you a few books that I have that I really, really like. And hopefully, so this one, let me see if I can share my screen with you again. Okay, so this is actually one of my current favorite books. I don't know if you can read the title. It's too bright. Okay, that's better, hopefully. Well, you can't read it, but it says Empowering People and Organizations Through Visual Collaboration. So this is one of the resources I had listed on my site. But what I really like about this book, I want to show you 2 or 3 books though. So this one is really good because it kind of walks through the simple basics things that we've talked about, you know, how do you do the kind of icons and all of that. But once you got past that stage, it actually talks about visual storytelling templating. And this is something I'm hoping I can kind of like really go into detail on the blog, like, because there's a lot to kind of explore based on the context of how you're using them. But some of the things I like about this is, for instance, it's like, okay, how do you do this if you're actually trying to do this in a group collaborative environment? How do you use visual metaphors? So here is an example of, I don't know if you can see that, right? How do you kind of create, this is a metaphor of like using an iceberg and kind of taking whatever current problem you have and mapping it onto that. So from the perspective of if you have practical problems that you are thinking about, this is a great exercise book that I have found that kind of helps you work your way through applying some of these ideas and creating yourself templates that you can then use for various things, right? So one of my favorite books, it's called Visual Thinking, and it's by William Brand. And then the other one, I think I already talked to you about Doodling, The Doodling Revolution by Sunny Brown. So let me show you finally Mike Rohde's. Okay, so hopefully, let's see if I can get that. This is very, very dull. Never mind, I can't go, but I was thinking, oh, there it is. Oh, give me a second while I get it. All right, so this is the Sketchnote workbook. I don't know if you can see that, but let's get it to. So if you're like sketchnoting, this is Mike Rohde's Sketchnote workbook. The digital version is actually super helpful, but it kind of walks you through the same things that we talked about, but then it has various sections: idea mapping, idea generation, sketchnote planning. So when I talk about, like, you know, chalk the talk, like how do you actually create your talk from sketchnotes, he has really good ideas in the sketchnote planning section. And sketchnote documentation kind of talks a little bit more about how you can kind of, and this was more applicable to sketch the doc style stuff. So look at those, and then there are lots of examples of how you can use sketchnoting to do travel guides and food guides and all that. But let's get back to the slides. So this segment now, the next.
Hey, Nitya.
Yes.
It looks like your camera might have frozen a little bit.
Oh, which one?
The camera you were using to show the books. I think we can only see the one book. And if you try flipping between the slides, you might not be able to see your deck anymore.
You're not able to see my deck?
No, it's still stuck on the camera for me.
Okay. Let me see what I can do. Do you see the slides at all?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, I'm gonna try to share it again.
Okay, sounds good.
Do you see it?
Yep, I see it now. There we go.
Okay, you're seeing the screen?
Yes, we see it.
Slides. Okay, so let's see if we can still flip and see do you still see the website now?
Yes.
And my camera?
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. Yeah. Hopefully it was still there. All right, so we'll try to go rapidly through the next two segments. This one is really like, okay, at this point, if you kind of got the basic toolkit, how do you kind of apply this to sketching technical documentation? So you want to look at rapid note-taking, which is sketchnoting, all the basics you looked at so far. Real-time information capture, how do you practice to capture this in real time? And then how do you add visual elements and narrative? So I tend to group the way I think about technical documentation into three buckets. First is, can you kind of build word imagery, right? So look at key terms in your technical space, whatever technical documentation you want to kind of visualize. First, go through it, scan it quickly, and look for what are the keywords or phrases that resonate or that are critical to describing that space. For each one of those, make sure like in a cheat sheet or in your back pocket, you have a few word images. So I'll show an example of that a little bit later. Word images and metaphors. So if there's a concept, so for example, cloud computing, right? And the parking utility and the parking meter. See if there's a metaphor that works for you, and then test it against some of the other ideas. See if you can actually translate other related concepts using this metaphor. Then for tutorials, you're really looking at visualizations like layouts and navigation and things like that. So there are standard things that you can try out to just start off and then build up from there. So I want to kind of, in this section, show you a few examples of things that I've done, and hopefully that'll give you a sense of how you can start sketching the dots. So the very first example, this is this is actually a dual screen, the Microsoft documentation, the dual screen devices segment. So let me see if I can go to this particular URL. And what it is Microsoft, I work in mobile, right? So Microsoft recently released what's called a device called the Surface Duo, and it's an Android device that also has a very unique feature, which is 2 screens, right? So this is the entire documentation about the Surface Duo, and there's a lot of it. You can see that the Surface Duo has pages for specific developers. So if you're a Kotlin or a Java developer, you start here, React Native start here, and so on. But then there's also the core aspect of there is a device, right? Like regardless of what language you're using, there is a certain thing about like how do you use a dual screen device? Are you using it from the web? Are you using it as a native app, etc., right? So there's a whole bunch of documentation in here. And my goal was starting looking at this, and I wanted to really kind of dive in and get a summary of what was going on. This image that you're seeing here is the entire set of kind of like pages that you saw distilled down into 4 giant sketch notes, right? So if you look at this, one of the things that kind of helps is in here, first of all, this goes back to my talking about grid. Whenever you've got a whole bunch of research that you're doing, for me, grid always ends up being the most useful thing. You can see almost, you can kind of like see the columns and cells set up here. And then you kind of see the navigation around it. So the first thing you want to do when you're distilling this down is understand what the big topics are. So if you look at this to kind of deconstruct what I had done, is you can immediately see that there are 2 or 3 big areas that you want to focus on. First of all, there's a basic area here which talks about what is dual screen, what are the value propositions, and what are kind of like the high level items that you need to know before you go anywhere else. And then the second big area is really guidance around what's called spanned apps. What Surface Duo does is it allows you to kind of build a whole new realm of applications that can be spanned across both displays, right? So there's a segment there. And then there's a segment here that kind of captures all the information around what are dual screen considerations, design patterns over here, and then kind of like how do you actually hide the scene. Now, all of this information came from the Microsoft site, but it's also a dual screen device that uses Android. It's a foldable device, and there are other guidances that are provided by Google and the Android developers ecosystem on how you should work with that. So the second thing, so when I kind of work through this, the second thing I do is actually go from gathering all that information, pulling stuff from other sources. So in this case, the dual screen app patterns, this was the single sheet that contained all the information. This was what the Microsoft documentation site looked like. We just had these 5 images of the 5 design patterns. This one is my version of a sketch note that took those patterns and expanded with enough text that describes each one of those. This, on the other hand, that you see in green is a Google site that talks about Android foldables in general. It's a broader category. So there are two different sources and a whole bunch of information that the research pulled in. So the next step was to go from there to kind of having this slide, like, so this was basically taking down to top, where you're able to bucket them into categories. So immediately by looking at that information in the previous slide, we're able to identify two things, right? First, there is a general category called foldable devices. I can pull stuff from the Google site as well as the Android site and pull them into one area and kind of build my slides and my sketch notes and kind of deep dive into that information. Second is a subset of foldable devices, which is dual screen. And so in dual screen, it's like, okay, once you know what a foldable is, a dual screen is a specialized version of that. Let's look at what new things came. So separate this out into general versus specialized. Color coding to kind of make sure that everything that came that's specific to Android, which has nothing to do with the device itself, but it's in like systemic, like it's very kind of about the operating system itself, what support it builds out of the box, comes from this side and is fed in here. The Surface Duo is fed in purple, and then there's an area here which talks about development. So when you think about distilling down all the stuff that you have, I actually kind of follow a 4-step process. First is, for that given tech topic that you're thinking of, collect your information from as many sources as you can. So in this case, there were two canonical sources. One was the Surface Duo site, which is a Microsoft device, so they have the documentation. The other is the Android developers site, right? Next, cluster-related topics. Here, the important thing is to find out what those terms and topics are that you can put at a high level, so you can actually bucket the information under them. Then connect them, right? So basically zoom out and figure out how these buckets connect to each other. Once you've done this, you can zoom in and then kind of start filling in the little buckets. So this is what we do, like in general, when we're trying to kind of like, you know, sift through any kind of information. But when you go with this approach, what you can do now is when you're connecting out, so in these steps, collecting from any sources is just the research. Clustering related topics, think about how you can select topics by keywords. So you can visualize the keyword and have a key around icons, and basically, you know, the equivalent of concepts that you might want to be reusing across different places. For connecting, think about the layouts and the containers. And for crystallizing, think about what you would do when you zoom in and actually kind of structure the information in a way that navigates through it. So this is an example of how I did that for a specific documentation, right? For a specific doc. So this comes from a recent event that we did called Learn Together. On the left side, what you see, which you can see is a wall of text, right? This is, and you can go to the link to that documentation, it's given here. This is what you see as a wall of text. It's literally kind of walking through all the steps of a particular tutorial or process, and it has a lot of information in there. But if you're someone who wants to kind of really quickly jump in and start building stuff, you just want to know what are the steps and what are the key aspects to it, you have to read all of this. It's not very visual. When you convert it into visual sketch note, this was the initial draft. There are two values that you see in here, right? First of all, just by looking at this, you have a better idea of how many steps there are and what the big picture of each step is, right? So you can look at this, and because it's numbered, you can say, okay, I start off with either installing or using an installation that's already existing, set it up, import, configure, package, run, validate, publish, right? So it goes around and you've got the big picture of all the elements in there. But with this raw thing that you've got, you immediately extracted 2 bits of information. One, you know what the different steps are. And 2, inside each step, you've extracted 2 or 3 keywords or, you know, like one takeaway message that you want to highlight in each. This is what a raw sketch note looks like. So when you start with this is, you know, like it's almost like you're taking notes as you read stuff and just keeping it together. This is where you are in the collection phase. This is what it looks like. Oops, I don't think I put the second one. Okay, so here is the final version. I mixed the slides up. I'll fix them later. But this is the raw version of the sketch note that's done in black and white. The same thing taken over and visualized and color coded and cleaned up. This is what it looks like. And when you look at this now, you immediately can get 3 things out of it. First of all, there are visual kind of cues that tell you what that particular segment does. So even if you can't read the text, it becomes really inclusive. So package, right? The metaphor of this being a package, it shows it up as a gift. And then under there, it says there are 3 steps to this, right? When you want to package a team step, there are just a checklist of 3 things that you need to do. If you look at the example for the next step, which says run app in Teams, the metaphor I was going there was a treadmill, right? Like you've got the little Teams icon that's running on the treadmill. And what you're really trying to do is see whether it's executing correctly and what you can do to make it run more optimally. The one below there, which talks about validate your app, if you look at the left side, when you look at the text, it basically says, here are the steps to validate your app. But what you really want to look at is 2 things. One, there is a checklist of things that you want to get done, and there is a tool that you need to use. Those are the only 2 things that you want to extract out of that text, right? And the validation timestamp immediately tells you this is the state at which you basically put a kind of like a, okay, you've been certified or you've been kind of like proven to work the way you say you work. So long story short is like you take your original sketch note, do a rough draft here where you're just extracting out the steps. This is a tutorial example. Extract out the steps. For each step, go in and extract out keywords or like, you know, just 1 or 2 sentences for something that you want. Come up with a visual icon or metaphor that will represent that step and then put it all together. Coloring it kind of brings it to life. Like you can see the separation of colors and you can see the color coding of the individual things that show you which ones are connected. So for example, setup and import are both in pink. They're both step A. And the fact that 2 of them immediately tells you that you have 1 of 2 paths that you want to take when you're at that particular level, step A of your process, etc. The best thing I think about digital, till now we've been doing a lot of things with paper and ink. One of the value propositions of digital is when you do this, you can then take the digital version and animate it. So in I think in here are some examples. I don't know if this one is animated either. Oh, I don't know why none of the animations are working. Okay, so here's an animation. This one should. Oh. I'm sorry, all my animations are broken. But I'll put a link in later. So you can actually look at it and see how it walks through the steps, step by step. And so in addition to kind of crystallizing the information and visualizing both the key points and the kind of like the cues for that step, you can actually walk through and navigate it. And that gives you something additional that you can show users to kind of get them to engage with your content. So the next example, oh, there you go. So when you've actually done this, I guess I hadn't set it up to autoplay. So when you've actually done this digitally, you can now like very easily walk through this, give people a sense of how your tech documentation can be sketch noted and made really a little bit more accessible. And this is something that you can immediately see developers gravitating towards and kind of getting and keeping, even like bookmarking it, right? If they want to look at it later. So here's the exercise. You won't have time to do it now, but if you want to try it by yourself, these are some examples of things that I'm going to try and put out working versions of. But first, glossary. If you're in a particular domain, go to the domain. Most documentation pages have a glossary page that defines all the text or the keywords. Pick keywords and figure out word images. The example that you see there up top right is an example of a word image. Find a single visual that explains the concept and explain it in text within like a few words so that the combination of them become a powerful way for you to like represent that idea. So here it's, and invariably you want to have like a touch of whimsy, right? So here, this is explaining machine learning. And the way it kind of represents machine learning is it's like teaching a toddler by showing them examples. And if you look closely, it's like there's a teacher showing examples and there are 2 kids and a computer, and the computer keeps saying, pick me, right? So it's a very simple way for you to say machine learning is about teaching computers, just like you would teach a toddler. And what you're doing is you're showing them examples of things and having them identify and test their understanding, right? So that's kind of word imagery. Do that for a glossary. If you have tutorials like the one we just saw, the example up there, you can convert those into a visual workflow, this kind of diagram that I mentioned. And then study guides like MS Learn, we did an example of this earlier. So study guides are really like the Surface Duo, where you have a lot of information and you want to go from capturing all of what's there into creating something that provides the big picture workflow and then allows you to then pick each box and dive in. So I won't take a break because I think we've only got about 15 minutes, but I want to go quickly through the next step and then we'll wrap it up and talk a little bit about what you can do. So with the Sketch the Docs, it was really about using visual sketchnoting to go and document technical writing or any kind of content, whether it's audio, video, websites, etc. This, on the other hand, is about planning. Suppose you've done all this, you've done your research, you've done your sketch notes, you've understood this concept really well, and you want to go out and give a talk on it. Can sketchnoting help you? So I gave this talk on Chalk the Talk at Let's Sketch Tech earlier this year. The links there give you the slides and the recording if you want to go look at it in more detail. But at a very high level, why do you want to think about public speaking? Hopefully you all are, but you want to do it for two reasons, right? Public speaking is known to have really high professional impact. When you go and give a talk on a subject, it kind of gives you visibility in the area that you want to be visible in. And it's really good for you, both from the perspective that you understand things better, and you're now seen as someone who understands this area and could become an expert there. The other side is do it for everyone, right? The more diverse speakers we have, the more representation we have on those stages, the better other people will see themselves in that role. So do it for more people like you, right? So if you're afraid to get on the stage for yourself, get there because someone like you is going to see you on the stage and be like, I can do this. But how do I use sketchnoting for public speaking? I'm going to walk through a simple example of something I had done, but really you want to think about three things. First, in your talk, you saw how we were sketchnoting. You have both static visuals and, like exactly as I'm using here, you have interactive videos. You can take concepts, sketchnote them, and embed them in your slides. So you can convey complex ideas to diverse audiences in your talk by making them visual. Second, recall, how can I connect my audience to takeaways? If time permits, I'll show you a zine as an example, but really a sketchnote is a very tangible physical artifact. You can ship images of your sketchnote. You can tweet it during your talk. You can give people a concrete way that ties back your entire talk to a single cheat sheet that they can take away with them and like kind of use to reconnect back. And that cheat sheet was built by you. Third, pacing. One of the things sketchnoting does is because when you're sketchnoting other people's talks, you start getting a sense of how much you're capable of absorbing of a given talk in a given amount of time. Now use that on yourself. Think you're giving the talk and first start with a sketch note. Say, I can only write so much information on a sheet of page. This is the maximum information I can have in a talk, and then reverse engineer your way from there. So there are three steps to doing, chalking the talk. First is before, and this is what I'll show you an example and we'll deconstruct it. Before is really about planning your talk out. During is when you're giving the talk or you're listening to someone else doing a talk. Observe and learn from how they structure it. Constantly kind of educate yourself on improving your pacing, your visualizations, your workflows to make that talk better. And after, we're only going to talk about the before and the after. After is very important. Use your sketch note as something you share immediately or during your talk because it'll close the loop for people. They'll be like, we heard what you said, and oh, here is a summary that I can immediately start seeing and reconnecting and reinforcing what I heard using the words and language that you want. This is how I go about chalking the talk. This is an example of a talk I gave on how to sketchnote. It was the very first one that I gave. And the way I went about it, this one slide shows you everything that you need to know, and then I'm going to show you the actual content itself. So first, when I thought about, hey, how do I want to be a better speaker? What do I want to talk about, right? I started by just doing a very raw sketch note, the color-coded thing you see up there. It's like, here are all the things I want to talk about, A, B, C, and D. They are just the big topics, right? And this is the flow. I want to do this, then this, then this. And I got a very basic flow. This is not necessarily where I end up, but I just want to make sure that all the big things that I want to talk about, the big topics, I put them down first. And that's the snake that you see. I have 30 minutes. I only want to talk about 10 things. So I'm going to put 10 topics, big topics in there. And I want to figure out some way to fit them all on the slide, right? On the workflow. Next, you're going to do your research. And for each one of them, you're going to figure out what are a few things that I need to mention. And this is where if you look to the left, it's really about using index cards, sticky notes, whatever, to just write down, right? Every card shouldn't have more than one piece of information, but write down, here's what I think I should say for this. Here's what I should, and visualize them. These will be very, very raw. But what you can do is when you've done this, you've got yourself a sense of, here is the flow. Here is just the big thing that I want to put in each, and it's not perfect. Stick them up on a wall, right? When you stick them up on a wall, you can kind of walk through this every day and be like, no, I can't, and then talk to them, right? And I can't really go from this one to this one. It needs one more element. Move it aside, add another sticky note or another index card. And as you go, you'll find that you start from that raw sketch note, which had the big picture. And now you're fleshing out the detail, but you're doing this one card at a time. Once you've got this, your next thing is really to assemble them, right? So these are all the cards that you have. Figure out what's the top level. Where do I go from here? Which ones can I remove? Which ones are not needed? When you reinforce and you distill those down, at the end, you're going to end up with a set of index cards that roughly tell you what you need to have on a slide and kind of give you a high-level picture of what you should visualize. That's when you move it into slides. So if you go look at the resource, that deck is the final outcome of those cards. And I want to show that to you here. So if you're interested, this was what the original sketch note looked like. So thinking about it, it's like, okay, I want to start with why. Invariably, you want to start with why am I doing something? And then here is an example. And you can see here, it's like, okay, it's the number one fear. It's called glossophobia. Why do people kind of why won't they do public speaking? The number one fear is like, glossophobia is like, I don't want to make a fool of myself. I'm just afraid of getting on stage, whatever it may be. And then from here, why should you do it? Here are some reasons. So 1, 2, 3, come up with them. And here, basically, the little search thing gives you an immediate sense of like, we're searching for a couple of answers around why we should be doing this, whenever there's a why. Go through representation, do it for you, do it for us, exactly what I told you. But now you can see this. One is me as a professional, the other is for the community. Go down here, CFP is a topic. What are the things I want to talk about? Single words. Then here's a sketch note. Here are 3 steps that I want to do before and after, and so on. If you follow this, here are the sketch notes, and hopefully here are the index cards for the same thing. Hopefully you'll be able to see that it's almost a one-to-one correspondence. So here is be a better speaker. The number one fear, glossophobia, find a stat, do a simple icon. This is all I want to say about it, right? Then why am I doing this? Visibility, clarity of understanding, knowledge transfer. Why are we afraid? And then my journey. These two you'll see were not in the original sketch note, but they were added in as I went off. So now it's like why, what, and how. Do it for you, right? And you can see now the words that were on the sketch note are making their way in here, and so on, right? So with this, you basically end up having the equivalent of a bunch of cards that you can then talk to, stuck on a wall, talk to, and see if you have a conversational flow. Once you've got that, then here's what the talk looks like. So from those keynotes, this is literally the exact same cards, except now you use existing, like you can use noun project and get icons. You can get screenshots of things that you think are relevant to your particular point and simplify it, right? So moving from building the flow out in a sketch note where you're just looking at the big picture to then breaking it down into details that you can actually put per card, sort, reinforce them, then finally making your slides is the process. And here's how I plan my talks. First, in the topic that I want to talk about, I look for all the keywords, I look for all the concepts, I look for the workflows, and I have a very simple summary of what I think should be the takeaway message, right? Once I've got those, the process is source it. Go research the topic, get as much information as you can. Sketch note all of those if you want. Just take visual notes, right? Write it down because it reinforces ideas to you. Then filter it down, discard things you don't need, and then sketch out that first sketch note that you saw. Use that, slice it down into index cards, 1 per macro, put them up, study them, add things that you need, remove things that you think don't make sense for the flow that you want. Speak it, keep speaking and rehearsing it until you've got a feeling that it flows together. When you're at that point, then convert to slides. Once you've converted to slides, then you're only working in the digital realm. You want to simplify it. And this is where, again, sketch notes come in handy, because if you have your original sketch note, you can remove a lot of the words and put a visual in, the animated visual of something that you had researched, right? It's a great way. Smooth it, filter it, and now when you're done, and this is important, if the first part that we talked about was the planning, when you've built this whole slide, the last sketch it is actually the clean version of your sketch note. Make one clean version and then schedule it on your Twitter account or whatever to tweet out right as you're doing the talk, because then people are going to hear all these, they're going to see the same words, the same visuals, and then see this takeaway message that kind of gives them the exclamation point. And last but not least, we're not going to have time to think about it, but one of the best ways that you can do a takeaway is this scene to zine style thing, right? A zine is nothing more than a comic. It's like a single page, and you can basically just write this. The format that you see here is it's take a page, sketch note 8 cells. It's a grid, right? Put your information into 8 grid squares. Put your name on the first one. The back one should be your takeaway message, and then pick 6 elements that you want to talk about. Put them on those 6 cells. And then kind of just use the same terminology, the same icons, etc. But now this is a tangible sheet of paper. And what you can do is you can either then share the visual of it and give people a sense of how this sketch note was built out, or you can print that out, fold it up, and actually give it to people as a little comic that they can take away with them, right? So this is kind of one of the ways in which you close the loop from your public speaking to ways you can take visual sketchnoting one step further. The other thing that I didn't have time to put in here is you can do the same thing for other domains. Once you've come up with a template for how you tell a story for one technology, try to see how you can take the template to a different domain, different keywords, different concepts, different visuals, or to a different language, right? Because you want to make sure that your images and your narrative kind of translate across audiences. And I think like I'm almost at time, so I'm super sorry. I hope this was interesting. If there are questions, do let me know. And I'm going to put this, I'm going to leave it with this particular link. So if you have any questions or comments, I would love feedback. And I will put all these slides up so you can go get them. I think that if you have feedback, this is where you can find me. And if there are any questions, Ayman, let me know. But otherwise, I'll kind of cede the floor and see if there's anything else I can help with.
All right, sounds good. So no questions have come in yet, but I'd love to plug that we have a survey, and it would be great if we could get feedback on this talk, and it'd be great for Nitya as well on how she can structure future talks. So that survey link is in the Q&A box right there. Please enter the code 12541. That lets us know it's for this event and not some other event. But yeah, we'd love to hear what you thought, how it went. And yeah, you can feel free to ask some Q&A questions before we wrap up.
I think someone asked, what are your favorite brands of pens for sketching? There actually, and I'll put this link in the resources section as well. There are people who kind of do a lot of pen and paper sketchnoting, which where they use different markers for doing highlights, things like that. There's a particular brand. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. It's super expensive, but it's really high quality. And that's what a lot of the professional sketchnoters prefer. I personally, I'll be quite honest, I just like black ink and pen and paper. So right, I have a fountain pen, it's a Parker. And that's kind of what I use for all my raw sketch notes. And in terms of the final ones, I've kind of literally moved to digital now. So I use Procreate on the iPad. And you have really good brushes, so you can kind of mimic a lot of the calligraphy, the writing, etc. very well. So in terms of the final outcome, I prefer using that because I can use a lot of brushes to create that same impact. But for my rapid live capture, it's always just regular pen and ink. But there are professional sketchnoting brands. They're very expensive, though. I'll put the resources out in that page. Thank you all, and I really would love to hear feedback, and definitely do check out that site for links to all the books that are available. If you do any sketch notes, what I would love to do is talk one-on-one to folks who are working on a talk or working on a tech documentation, and kind of get a sense of what you're working on, maybe even understand how it is and help you there. So if you do have ideas of something you want to work on, just reach out. I think that'll also help me improve the materials for others. And with that, I think we've hit our 3-hour mark. So thank you all very much. And if you do anything with this Please don't forget to tag me at Nithya on Twitter, #visualize it, and share it on social media. Thank you.
Thanks, Nithya.